There is someone in your life who keeps hurting you. You will now learn exactly how to break free from this person using insights from Carl Jung that reveal why your mind keeps you trapped and how to escape these invisible chains. Despite every rational thought screaming to walk away, despite friends telling you to leave, despite your own soul begging for freedom, you stay, you return, you hope, you break yourself trying to fix what was never yours to repair. The phone notification sends your heart racing with desperate hope. Your mind issues warnings while your body betrays you, craving their attention once more. You know this dance destroys you, yet something ancient and primal pulls you back into the fire. This isn't weakness. This isn't stupidity. This is your unconscious mind operating according to hidden laws that Jung spent his lifetime decoding. What feels like love is actually a complex psychological mechanism, one that can be understood, dismantled, and transformed. By the end of this exploration, you will possess the precise psychological tools to sever these toxic bonds permanently. You will understand why your attachment feels so compulsive, why leaving seems impossible, and most importantly, how to reclaim your power and break free forever. But be prepared, the truth about your attachment will challenge everything you believe about love, identity, and human connection. What emerges from this psychological investigation may initially disturb you, but it offers something far more valuable, the key to your liberation. The human psyche operates like a vast theater where internal dramas play out through external relationships. When someone captures our attention with unusual intensity, Jung reveals we're witnessing something remarkable, the projection of our inner world onto another person. This process unfolds beneath conscious awareness. The individual you believe you're desperately attached to represents archetypal energies, the anima or animus, primordial images of the feminine and masculine that dwell in every human psyche. These figures symbolize the undeveloped aspects of our personality, the missing pieces we unconsciously seek to complete ourselves. But here lies the deception. What feels like profound connection is actually psychological completion seeking its reflection. The other person becomes a living screen upon which we project our unlived potential, our disowned qualities, our secret longings for wholeness. This projection creates an intoxicating illusion. The beloved seems to possess exactly what we lack: confidence where we feel insecure, emotional availability where we feel empty, power where we feel helpless. Yet this perceived completeness exists only in the realm of fantasy, constructed from our own unconscious material. When reality inevitably clashes with projection, when the other person fails to maintain the idealized image we've imposed upon them, something devastating occurs. Rather than recognizing the illusion, we double down on the fantasy. We blame ourselves for their inconsistency, twist our behavior to resurrect the projection, sacrifice our authenticity to maintain the dream. Jung warned that as long as these inner figures remain unconscious, we remain prisoners of our own psychological material. Each relationship becomes a desperate attempt to capture what can only be found within. Each rejection, a confirmation that we are fundamentally incomplete without the other. The path to freedom begins with a radical recognition. The person we cannot release holds keys to aspects of ourselves we have yet to claim. When we stop projecting our inner wholeness onto others and start developing these qualities within ourselves, we begin to break the spell of psychological dependency. Human survival begins with a devastating bargain: authenticity traded for acceptance. The child quickly learns which smiles bring warmth, which silence ensures safety, which parts of their wild nature must be hidden to keep the adults close. This creates what Jung called the persona, our social mask. Think of the persona as psychological armor, necessary for navigating the world, but dangerous when we forget we're wearing it. The mask becomes the prison when we lose track of where it ends and we begin. In practical terms, this means entering relationships as performers rather than people. We memorize our partner's preferences like lines in a play, shape-shifting to match their desires, convinced that perfect performance will finally earn unconditional love. But this strategy contains a fatal flaw. No external validation can fill the void created by self-abandonment. The more we contort ourselves to fit another's desires, the further we drift from our essential nature. The love we receive feels hollow because it's directed toward a character we're playing rather than who we actually are. This dynamic creates what Jung called the provisional life, a state of perpetual postponement where we delay authentic existence, believing that once we perfect our performance, once we win the other's complete approval, then we'll be free to be ourselves. But that moment never arrives because the foundation is built on deception. The psychological cost is immense. Beneath the polished persona, our true self withers from neglect. We become strangers to our own desires, disconnected from our intuition, unable to distinguish between what we genuinely want and what we believe we should want. This self-estrangement manifests as a peculiar form of suffering. We feel perpetually empty despite external success, lonely even when surrounded by people, anxious despite apparent security. The persona has become a prison, and we've forgotten we hold the key. What we label as anxiety in toxic relationships is actually the voice of our authentic self, screaming from the depths of psychological exile. It's the soul's alarm system, signaling that something essential is being violated, that we're living at odds with our fundamental nature. This anxiety carries profound intelligence. It arises precisely when we're betraying ourselves most deeply, when we're swallowing our truth to avoid conflict, when we're diminishing our light to make others comfortable, when we're choosing familiar suffering over unknown freedom. The tight chest, the racing heart, the sleepless nights, these are not merely symptoms to be medicated away. They represent the battleground where our constructed self fights against our authentic nature. Every time we silence our needs to preserve a relationship, every time we accept crumbs while starving for genuine nourishment, we create an internal war. Jung understood that the psyche seeks balance with relentless determination. When we live divided against ourselves, when we force our wild nature into domesticated forms, the unconscious rebels, anxiety becomes the weapon of this rebellion, making it impossible to rest comfortably in our self-betrayal. This explains why reassurance from others provides only temporary relief. The problem isn't external. It's the fundamental split between who we are and who we pretend to be. No amount of external validation can heal this wound because it requires internal integration. The anxiety also reveals something crucial about our attachment patterns. We don't fear losing the other person as much as we fear being forced to confront ourselves. The relationship serves as a distraction from the deeper work of self-discovery, a way of avoiding the confrontation with our unlived life. When we finally understand anxiety as a messenger rather than an enemy, we can begin to decode its communication. It's telling us that something precious is being sacrificed, that we're living below our potential, that the time has come to choose authenticity over acceptance. Beneath conscious choice operates a hidden director, the shadow. This psychological vault contains everything we've been taught to reject: our anger, our needs, our power, our darkness. Jung understood that repression doesn't eliminate these qualities. It drives them underground where they secretly orchestrate our attractions. Here's how the shadow's choreography works. We're magnetically drawn to people who embody what we've disowned, attracted to their confidence while denying our own authority, fascinated by their emotional freedom while suppressing our own intensity. The very traits that captivate us reflect the exiled parts of ourselves. In practical terms, this means your most toxic relationships are actually invitations from your unconscious, opportunities to reclaim what you've abandoned. The person who wounds you in familiar ways isn't just repeating your trauma, they're offering you a chance to heal it by facing what it represents within you. The shadow also explains why we often hate in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. Their selfishness triggers us because we've rejected our own needs. Their manipulation disturbs us because we've denied our own desire for control. There comes a moment when the psychological division becomes unbearable, when the cost of maintaining false unity exceeds the fear of authentic existence. This crisis marks the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process by which an individual becomes psychologically whole. Individuation represents a death and rebirth. The identity built on external validation must dissolve to make space for something more authentic. This process requires tremendous courage because it means abandoning the familiar strategies that once promised safety, even when those strategies have become prisons. The journey begins with radical honesty, the willingness to examine our patterns without the comfortable shield of blame. Why do we abandon ourselves so readily? What are we trying to heal through others? What parts of our nature have we exiled to maintain acceptance? These questions penetrate the heart of our psychological structure, revealing the intricate ways we've learned to betray ourselves. Each recognition brings both pain and liberation. Pain from acknowledging our participation in our own suffering. Liberation from the illusion that we're powerless to change. Individuation also requires us to reclaim our projections. Instead of seeking in others what we lack, we must develop these qualities within ourselves. If we're drawn to someone's confidence, we must cultivate our own authority. If we crave their emotional freedom, we must learn to honor our own feelings. This process is not linear or comfortable. It involves facing the terror of existing without external validation, learning to trust our own judgment, developing the capacity to be alone without feeling abandoned. It means grieving the fantasy of completion through others and accepting the responsibility of completing ourselves. Yet as we progress through individuation, something remarkable occurs. The desperate need for others' approval begins to dissolve. We discover that our worth doesn't depend on external recognition, that our happiness doesn't require others' participation, that our completeness comes from within. This transformation doesn't eliminate our capacity for relationship, it transforms it. When we're no longer seeking salvation through others, we can engage authentically. When we're not trying to fill our emptiness through external means, we can offer genuine presence. Liberation from toxic attachment is not about forgetting or pretending the connection never existed. It's about understanding the relationship's true function in our psychological development and consciously choosing to withdraw the energy we've invested in maintaining an illusion. This process requires us to grieve not just the loss of the person, but the death of the fantasy we've constructed around them. We must mourn the version of ourselves that believed completion could come through another, the dreams that will never materialize, the potential that existed only in our imagination. The grief is necessary because it allows us to reclaim the psychic energy we've invested in the other person. Every fantasy we've entertained, every hope we've nurtured, every projection we've maintained has required tremendous psychological fuel. As we withdraw these investments, we recover the power to direct our energy toward authentic growth. Release also involves recognizing the gifts hidden within our suffering. The person who wounded us has served as a teacher, revealing aspects of our psyche that required attention. The pain has been a messenger, pointing toward unhealed wounds that needed acknowledgement. The obsession has been a compass, indicating the direction of our unlived potential. This recognition doesn't minimize the damage or excuse harmful behavior. It simply acknowledges that our suffering has served a purpose in our psychological development. When we can see this purpose clearly, we can complete the lesson and move beyond the need for the teacher. The process of release is simultaneously an act of reclamation. Each fantasy we dissolve returns us to reality. Each projection we withdraw brings us closer to ourselves. Each boundary we establish demonstrates our growing commitment to authentic existence. As we learn to hold our own space, to validate our own experience, to trust our own judgment, we discover something profound. We possess everything we've been seeking in others: the capacity for love, for approval, for completion. All of it exists within us, waiting to be recognized and claimed. True freedom emerges not from the absence of connection, but from the presence of choice. When we're no longer driven by unconscious compulsions, when we're not seeking to heal old wounds through new relationships, when we've reclaimed our projections and integrated our shadow, we can engage with others from a place of sovereignty rather than need. This sovereignty manifests as the ability to be alone without feeling abandoned, to be rejected without questioning our worth, to be criticized without losing our center. It's the capacity to love without grasping, to care without controlling, to be vulnerable without surrendering our power. Individuation also requires developing what Jung called the transcendent function, your psyche's ability to negotiate peace between warring aspects of yourself. Instead of being torn apart by opposing feelings, you learn to hold both love and anger, both connection and independence, both compassion and boundaries. This psychological integration creates a new relationship with suffering. Instead of being overwhelmed by painful emotions, we can hold them with curiosity and compassion. Instead of being driven by unconscious patterns, we can observe them with awareness and choice. Sovereignty also transforms our relationship with others. When we're no longer seeking completion through external means, we can appreciate people for who they are rather than who we need them to be. When we're not trying to fix our wounds through others, we can offer genuine support without hidden agendas. The sovereign individual doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable, doesn't need to be understood to feel valid, doesn't need to be loved to feel complete. This freedom creates space for authentic relationship, connection, based on mutual recognition rather than mutual need. Perhaps the most radical act of self-love is the willingness to choose ourselves, not from a place of selfishness, but from a place of integrity. This choice requires us to acknowledge that we are worthy of respect, deserving of kindness, capable of creating the life we desire. This choosing of self manifests in countless small decisions. The choice to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. The choice to honor our needs even when others disapprove. The choice to walk away from situations that diminish our spirit, even when staying seems easier. Each conscious choice builds psychological muscle, strengthening our capacity to live authentically. We learn to trust our instincts, to value our opinion, to believe in our worth. We discover that the approval we've been seeking externally can be generated internally through aligned action. The choice to live authentically also requires us to accept responsibility for our experience. Instead of waiting for others to change, we change ourselves. Instead of blaming circumstances for our suffering, we examine our response. Instead of seeking rescue from outside, we become our own liberator. This responsibility is both burden and gift. It's the burden of acknowledging our participation in our own suffering, the gift of recognizing our power to create change. It's the burden of facing our unlived life, the gift of claiming our potential. The journey from unconscious attachment to conscious freedom demands everything. Questioning your deepest beliefs about love, examining wounds you've spent lifetimes avoiding, facing the parts of yourself that terrify you most. Yet those who walk this path discover something extraordinary. The very qualities you've been desperately seeking in others, love, acceptance, validation, wholeness, have been waiting within you all along. The external search was your soul's way of directing attention inward toward the only source of genuine fulfillment. The person who wounded you becomes a teacher. The pain becomes a doorway. The obsession becomes a compass pointing toward your unlived potential. The suffering becomes sacred when it serves awakening. When you finally release your grip on those who hurt you, you're not losing love. You're reclaiming it. You're not becoming isolated. You're becoming whole. The desperate seeking for completion through others dissolves into the peaceful recognition of your inherent sovereignty. Your unconscious patterns built these chains. Your conscious choice dismantles them, starting now. The question is not whether you will face challenges in relationship. You will. The question is whether you will face them asleep or awake, unconsciously repeating old patterns or consciously creating new possibilities. The choice, as it has always been, is yours.